If you're looking for ways to add some flair to your website or level up the design of your sales pages or landing pages, icons might be the answer you're looking for. In this video, you'll learn how you can use icons to create designs like these to enhance the design of your website, strengthen your brand, and attract attention to specific areas that you want to stand out. Hi, I'm Christine with Thrive Themes. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, here is your friendly reminder to do so. And don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified when we publish new videos. So we are going to start by taking a closer look at some examples of designs that use icons. Then we will quickly go over some basic concepts inside the icon element that will help you achieve those designs. And finally, we are going to create some of those examples step by step. So let's start by taking a look at our examples. So in the hero section here, we have an icon that rotates as it appears on the page. Then we have an icon in this button here that changes colors when we hover over the button. Then we have some icons in the styled list over here on the right, but they are styled creatively to give this section a unique design. Then in the next section, we have some icons with an offset gradient shape. In the section following that, we have some subtle icons in the background, and you'll notice that as the page scrolls, the icons move. Then in the next section, we have some icon shapes with some other icon shapes offset on top of them. In the following section, we have some double icon combinations. Again, one is offset from the other. In the next section, we have icons with patterned backgrounds, and you'll notice that these icons aren't on the page when the page loads. They actually appear when they come into view. Then in the next section, we have an icon that animates when it appears, but it also pulses when you hover over it. Then we have some icons that are used in conjunction with tooltips. You can also create a horizontal timeline with icons. You can also use an icon as a divider between sections. You can add this slanted colored background to your icons. You can also add a faux shadow to your icons. And you can have icons rotate on different views. So right now the icon is pointing to the right, and if we were to view this page on a tablet, then we could have the icon pointing down. And if we were to view this page on a mobile phone, then the arrow might change direction again. So there's quite a lot you can do with icons to add visual interest to your website and landing pages. Which one is your favorite? Let us know down in the comments. All right, next let's go over some basic concepts using the icon element. Just by understanding these basic things, you'll be able to create most of the designs we just looked at. So I've got a blank page here open in Thrive Architect. Let's go ahead and add an icon to the page. And let's go ahead and choose this one. First of all, it's important to know that there's two parts to the icon element. There's the icon itself, and then there's the icon container. The container is the green box surrounding the icon when the icon is selected. So if you need to add space between the icon and the container around it, the easiest thing to do is to add padding to the icon container. So I'll go to Layout and Position, and I'll go ahead and lock these dimensions, and let's add some inside padding. And so right away you can see that there's just a little bit more space between the actual icon and the green container around it. But of course, a white container on a white page doesn't really stand out. So let's go ahead and let's add a background color. I'll go to the Background Style tab, and I'll go ahead and add a solid color. But just like content boxes and background sections in Thrive Architect, you can layer multiple background layers to add even more visual interest. So you can do something like add a gradient. So I think you get the idea. With just these four options here, solid color, image, gradient, and pattern, you can add multiple layers and create some really interesting designs. Now what we have here is a square, but you can play with the shape by going to Borders and Corners. So you can create a leaf shape by selecting one of the corners, and adjusting the corner radius. And then do the same with the opposite corner. And if you would like to make the shape a circle, you can simply select all 4 corners and then adjust the corner radius so that they're all the same. Now, to call attention to your icons as they appear on the page, you can also add animation. So let's go to the Animation and Action tab, and let's go ahead and add a CSS animation. And as you can see, you have several options, and it's super easy to add something like a rotate animation. Now, the icon element is also responsive. So let's go to our example, and let's say that we have an arrow here pointing to some text, and it's pointing to the right in desktop mode because the text is on the right. Now, when you switch to tablet mode, if the elements now have to stack on top of each other, you don't want the arrow pointing to the right anymore. Now you want it pointing down. So you can absolutely do that. And let's say that you want to rotate the arrow again on mobile phones. You can definitely do that as well. And it's super easy to do. So let's go back to our blank page here. So right now in desktop mode, our arrow is pointing up. Let's go to the tablet mode. And let's go to main options, and let's just go ahead and rotate this icon. Let's rotate it 90 degrees. So now it's pointing to the right. And now let's go to mobile phone mode, and let's change this again, and let's make it 180 degrees. So now it's pointing down. And there we go. It's just that simple. So if I go back through the screen sizes, you can see that the arrow changes direction. So those are the basics, and just knowing those simple concepts, I think you'll be able to do quite a lot with the icon element. If you'd like to know more in-depth information about the icon element, we do have a few articles in our knowledge base. Next, I'll show you step by step how to create some interesting designs using icons. So I've got my page open in Thrive Architect, and what I'm going to do is show you how to build some of the examples right here on the page. So we won't be reconstructing the entire page. I'll just go over individual examples so that we can keep things moving. So in section 1, we have 3 different examples of icons. We have one up here, we have this button, and we have this styled list. For this example, this is just a regular icon, and to make this rotate when it appears on the page, you simply go to the Animation and Action tab, and you add a CSS animation. So that's the first example. So let's move on to the next one. For this button here, this is actually really easy to do. Let's go ahead and let's add a button. Let's go ahead and align this to the left. Now to change the style of this button, you can simply go to the paintbrush icon at the top. And as you can see, there are several different styles to choose from. I'll go ahead and choose this one. Now to make this button look a little bit more like this one with the rounded edges on the side, I'll simply go to the Borders and Corners tab, and I can see that the upper left corner has a 50 pixel radius, while the upper right corner only has a 24 pixel radius. So to make sure that all of the corners have the same corner radius, I'll simply select all 4 corners, and I'll make sure that this is 50 pixels. Now, if you would like to change the color for this button, you can easily do that by going to the Main Options tab and choosing a new color, but we are mostly concerned with the icon. So we want this icon to change colors when we hover over this button. So make sure that the button is selected. And let's change the state to the hover state. Now let's go ahead and select the icon, and let's choose a new color. Okay, so now let's go back to the normal state. And when we hover over this button, we can see that the icon changes colors. Now moving on to the styled list on the right, this is actually really easy to create. So what we have here is a styled list, and that is inside of a content box, and that content box has the white background. So that is inside of another content box which has the yellow background. So let's go ahead and let's add a content box to our page. Let's go ahead and give that a yellow background. Let's go ahead and round those corners. And now let's add another content box. I'll place that inside of the yellow one. So let's go ahead and give this a white color. Let's go ahead and round those corners as well. And let's also adjust the left and right margins. All right, so now let's add a styled list inside of the white content box. Now the reason why we don't see anything here is because our text is white and our icons are white. So making sure that the styled list element is selected, let's go to the typography tab and let's change our font color to something that we can see a little better. Okay, so now let's go ahead and work on the icon portion of this design. So let's select the icon. We want the container to be a circle, so let's go to borders and corners. Make sure that all 4 corners are selected and then increase the radius for all 4 corners. Then let's add a color to the icon background. So let's go to the background style tab and let's add a solid color. Now I've already got my colors saved here, so I can make sure that the colors match exactly. Next, we'll need to adjust the spacing. So let's go to Layout and Position, and we'll need to add a little bit to the right margin. And then to increase the container so that it's a little bit larger, like our example, but without increasing the size of the icon, we'll need to do that using the padding. So I'll lock all 4 dimensions here, and now let's increase the inside padding. And now we're just going to move the entire list element over to the left. So let's select the styled list element and let's just adjust the left margins. All right, so that is basically it. Now, of course, you might want to change the icon, which you can easily do by clicking on the icon, then going to the main options tab. And you might also want to change the color of the icons, and you might also want to adjust the spacing between the styled list and the content box. But I think you've got the idea of how to put together this particular design. Next, let's recreate this example where we have an icon with an offset gradient shape behind it. This is actually really easy to create, and what's going on here is this icon is actually technically inside of this content box here, but the position is specified relative to this content box. So let's start by adding a content box to our page. Now let's add an icon inside of it. Now let's adjust the size of our content box. So let's make sure that the content box is highlighted in the breadcrumbs. And we will need to get rid of some of the inside padding, so let's go ahead and do that. And now let's specify the height and width of our content box. And let me add just a little bit to the bottom margin so we have a little more room to work. Okay, so now to add a background to this content box, we'll just go to the Background Style tab and let's add a gradient. To cut off the upper left-hand corner of this shape, we'll need to go to the Borders and Corners tab. Then let's select the upper left-hand corner and let's increase that corner radius. And now let's go ahead and position the icon. So let's select the icon. Then we'll go to the Layout and Position tab. Let's go to Advanced. Let's select Relative, and we'll adjust the horizontal and vertical position. Now the reason why our example is a little further to the left than the example here is because our example is inside of a content box, which adds a little bit of padding. All right, so that's it for this example. In this next example, we will be adding subtle icons to the background of a background section or a block. So let's go ahead and add a background section to our page. Let's go ahead and give this a color. So I'll go to the Background Style tab. And now let's add a couple of icons to our background section. Now let's adjust the size and color of our icons. All right, so now that we have our icons, we'll need to position them in this section. So I'm going to go ahead and select this icon here. Then let's go to Layout and Position. Let's open the Advanced tab, and we're going to use Absolute Positioning. Now I would like the circle to be more in the upper left-hand corner of this section, so I'll choose the upper left position. And then you can use the top and left fields to fine-tune your position. Now you may have noticed that when we clicked the Absolute button, the background section got a lot smaller. If you need your background section to be larger, you can simply select the section, make sure that background section is highlighted in the breadcrumbs, then go to the Main Options tab and change the section minimum height. But if your icon is going to be more of a background element, then usually the other content in the section will dictate the size of the section. So let's go ahead and add some content. So next, let's place the triangle icon where we want it in this section. So make sure that the icon is selected. Then let's go to the Layout and Position tab. Then we're going to go down to the Advanced section, and let's turn on Absolute Positioning. And I would like this triangle to be in the lower left-hand corner, so I will select Lower Left, and I'll fine-tune the position using the bottom and left fields. Now the reason why I have all this extra space here is because I specified a minimum section height. So making sure that the background section is highlighted in the breadcrumbs, I'll go back up to the Main Options tab and I'll simply adjust my section minimum height. Now when you are working with icons that are supposed to be in the background, you could possibly run into this issue, which is that your icon may end up being on top of other elements in this section. For example, right here we have this triangle on top of the button, but we actually want the button to be on top of the triangle. So to fix that, we'll need to adjust the Z index. So let's click on the button, make sure that button is highlighted in the breadcrumbs. Then let's go down to Layout and Position. And let's go to the Advanced tab. And we can turn on Relative Positioning. And we can just make sure that this is something higher than what the triangle is going to be. So let's make sure that this is something like 5. Now, as you probably saw, when I turned on Relative Positioning, the button went on top of the triangle. But for extra security, if you like, you can also go to the icon here, and let's go to Layout and Position, and just make sure that the Z index is a lower number, so we're fine here with 3. Let's do the same thing with the circle. So with the circle selected, I'll make sure that the Z index is maybe 2. And let's also select this text element here. And let's turn on Relative Positioning. And let's make this 5. All right, so the final part of this section is that when we scroll, these icons will move. So to do that, we're going to use the Scroll Behavior tab. So let's select the circle icon. And let's go to Scroll Behavior. And let's turn on Parallax. And let's add a new effect. So let's go ahead and pick an effect. We can use the horizontal scroll effect. I'll let you play with these options on your own. And if you turn on Parallax Preview, you can see what that animation is going to look like. All right, so from here you can add scroll behaviors to the rest of the icons in your background. Next, let's recreate this example where we have 2 icons overlapping each other. Let's start by adding 2 icons to our section. All right, so we have our 2 icons. Next, let's adjust the color and the size. Okay, so we've got our icons. Now all we have to do is position them. Now this is actually a lot easier than you might think. So let's go ahead and align both of these icons to the left. And now I'm simply going to use the margin settings to position the triangle on top of the square. And finally, to make sure that the triangle is on top of the square, let's adjust the Z index. And that's it. Let's move on to the next example. Next, let's go over how to create these double icon combinations inside of a content box. So let's start by adding a content box to our page. And let's go ahead and add 2 icons inside of this content box. Next, let's go ahead and change the color and size of our icons. And now let's work on our content box. So let's make sure that the content box is selected in the breadcrumbs. And let's add a background color. Next, we'll actually need to make sure that there isn't too much of an inside padding to this content box. So let's go to the Layout and Position tab, and let's just make this 1 pixel. Let's also specify a fixed width and height. Let's go ahead and center align this content box, and let's go ahead and turn this into a circle using the Borders and Corners tab. Okay, so now we'll need to position this icon to the upper right-hand corner of the content box. So let's select this icon and let's go to the Layout and Position tab. Let's go to Advanced and let's turn on Absolute Positioning. And we want this to be in the upper right-hand corner. And then you can use the top and right fields to fine-tune the positioning. Next, let's fine-tune the positioning of this icon. So again, make sure that this icon is highlighted in the breadcrumbs. Then you'll go to the Layout and Position tab, and you're going to go to the Advanced tab. And let's turn on Relative Positioning. And you can use the horizontal and vertical fields to make your adjustments. And don't forget to increase the Z index to make sure that this icon will be layered on top of this one. And that's it. Let's move on to the next example. Now for this example where we have the patterned background behind each icon, I think you already know how to do this. So all you have to do is add a background pattern to your icon using the Background Style tab. You'll also need to adjust the inside padding using the Layout and Position tab. And you can turn your icon container from a square into a circle using the Borders and Corners tab. And then to add effects, you can go to the Animation and Action tab and add some CSS animation. And that's it. So let's keep our momentum going and let's move on to the next example. Now this is probably my favorite example because it looks very impressive, but it's actually really easy to put together. All it is an icon inside of a content box. So let's start by adding a content box to our page. Now to add an image to this content box, I'll simply go to the Background Style tab and I'll add an image. And let's specify a size to this content box by going to the Layout and Position tab, and let's specify a fixed width and a fixed height. Then to change this square into a circle, let's go to the Borders and Corners tab, and let's round all 4 of the corners. Now, if you're getting more of an oblong shape than a true circle, then you may need to adjust some things in the Layout and Position tab. All right, so next, let's add an icon inside of this content box. All right, so we've got our icon here, but we'll need to do quite a lot of styling to make it look like this one. So let's start by adding a white background. Next, let's round all 4 of the corners to make this a circle. And let's increase the padding. And if you need to, you can adjust the size and color of your icon. Now this halo here is actually accomplished with a drop shadow on the icon element. So again, make sure that the icon is selected in the breadcrumbs, and then let's go to the Shadow tab, and let's add a drop shadow. Now for the color, let's choose white with a little bit of transparency to it. And now we will just need to adjust these settings to make the drop shadow look like this. So for the blur, we actually want that to be 0 because as you can see, this has a very crisp edge. For the spread, we'd like to increase that so that it's larger than our actual icon. And for the distance, we want that to be 0 because we want that to be centered right on our icon. All right, so that's it. Let's click Apply. Next, let's position this icon to the lower right of the content box. So let's go to the Layout and Position tab, and let's go ahead and open the Advanced tab, and let's use Absolute Positioning. And let's make sure that the lower right position is selected, and then you can use the bottom and right fields to fine-tune the position. Now there's a couple of special things that happen with this particular example that make it look really impressive, so let's take a look at the example one more time. So when the icon appeared, it animated to draw attention to the icon. And then hovering over the icon changes the color and it also pulsates. So let's go ahead and do that with our example. So let's start by changing the color when someone hovers their mouse over the icon. So again, just make sure that the icon is selected in the breadcrumbs. Then let's change the state to the hover state. And then in the main options, let's go ahead and change the color. Now, still in the hover state, let's go to the Animation and Action tab, and let's add a CSS animation. As you can see, there's quite a long list of animations to choose from. Let's choose the Pulse animation, and let's go back to the normal state. All right, and so the last thing is to add the animation when the icon appears on the screen. So under Normal State, we'll go to Animation and Action, and let's add a CSS animation. And you do have quite a few choices here. Under Other, let's choose the Rotate animation. And that's it. In just a few clicks, you've got a really impressive looking icon. So the next example is icons with tooltips. So if we hover over this icon, the icon bobs up and down, and then we also see some additional information. This is really easy to do. So let's head back on over to our page in Thrive Architect. Now for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through every single step of how to create this exact design, because I think you know how to do that by now. All it is an icon inside of a content box. And then to achieve the hover effects, let's go to the hover state. Let's go to the Animation and Action tab, and here we have our two actions. So to create the bobbing effect, all you have to do is add a CSS animation, and to add a tooltip, you can add a tooltip. And that's all there is to it. Next, you can use icons to create a horizontal timeline. This is actually super easy to do. So we're going to start with a 3-column setup. And now I'm going to add a content box inside one of these columns. Then inside of this content box, I'm going to add another set of columns. And I'm going to select the 1/3, 2/3 layout. Then I'll place an icon inside of this first column. And let's go ahead and make that white so you can see that a little better. And then in this column here, we're going to add a divider. Let's go ahead and change the divider's style. And let's choose a different color. Next, we have some spacing adjustments to make. So let's move this column divider to the left a little bit. So I'll select column, and then I'll go to vertical position, and I'll select the middle option. And then you can play with the margins and padding to get the spacing on the left and on the right exactly as you want it. And now let's go ahead and add some more content. And then to easily copy what we did in this first column, in the second column, you can simply duplicate this content box and move it over. And of course, to change the icon, you can simply click on the icon, go to Main Options, and choose a new icon. All right, I think that just about covers it. Using these techniques, you'll be able to create gorgeous, eye-catching designs on your own website. And don't forget, the icon element can be used everywhere, on opt-in pages for growing your email list, sales pages, confirmation pages, and more. But of course, you will need to get Thrive Architect first. You can get Thrive Architect and the rest of our tools when you purchase Thrive Suite. Click the link down below to learn more. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this one was helpful, and we'll see you next time.